Yes, I'm here with my friend Suzanne Rice, who I've known for 13 years.
You were pregnant with Justin, if that helps.
Exactly where my mind went.
Yeah.
13 years ago, my family and I moved across the street from Suzanne and her family. We really, after meeting them, wanted to promptly move, but I guess we were committed. Committed to the house, about to be committed to the mental institute that was that block. So anyhow, welcome, Suzanne.
Thank you so much.
All right. So Suzanne and I are here to talk about any number of topics, but I thought first maybe you could just start by telling us about yourself, your life, kind of, how you arrived here.
Yeah, no, fair enough. So I am from Ireland. So I probably came on a slightly different journey to most people, not quite a boat, but I won my green card in the lottery, and then we got the map of America out and decided that we didn't want to live on the East Coast because there was too many people with blue hair. And we didn't want to live in the West Coast because it was too expensive in our minds. And then the North was just too cold. So that just left a section of the South. Now, we didn't know any states or anything, to be perfectly clear. We just sort of drew a box around a map. And we put a pin in the map and we ended up with Tucson, or Tucson, Arizona, as we call it. And we decided we were going to Tucson, and we packed our bags. And about 6 weeks before we left, I saw a documentary on the TV about the heat in Tucson, and that they would close down the airport during the summer because the tar would melt. I'm like, I can't go there. That's entirely too hot. So we got the map back out again, and we were like, okay, the next pin, that's it. We don't care whether it's hot or not. So we landed on Austin, Texas. Now, I mean, basically it's the same heat as Tucson, but who knew?
Tomato.
So we
went.
What
a big difference!
What a big difference! Yes, so we got on a plane and shipped 7 tea chests. If anybody knows what tea chests are, shipped 7 tea chests of stuff to Houston. We went to Austin, and we began our merry way. That was our journey into America.
Yeah, and how did you arrive in San Jose?
Oh, then, so you'll find that my life is perfectly planned at all times. So we were minding our own business coming back in a flight from Ireland after about 5 years in Austin. And we loved Austin, still love Austin. And a couple of people had moved out to the Bay Area, and we were like, what's all this Bay Area techie type stuff about? So let's go and have a look. I mean, literally, that was the plan. So we thought we'd come out here for 5 years and we'd look around and see, which we did. And then we moved back to Ireland for a year. And then we came back out here again, in theory, for another 5 years. And that's sort of, the rest is history. Got stuck.
The rest is history. Yeah. You have a house you still have your house in Ireland.
We have a house in Ireland, which is great. We go, well, pandemics aside, I probably would go back 3 or 4 times a year, and we would go back for a month during the summer. And the kids have, over the last probably 6 or 7 years, basically gone for the whole summer and done camps over there and all of that type of thing. So definite strong connection still to Ireland, and we're so sad this year that we can't go there, but hopefully soon.
Yeah. And then how did you get into tech, aside from the tech thing that was happening?
The tech thing, yeah. So, well, the tech thing was funny because my undergrad was in European law and politics. So it was perfectly obvious I should move to America and work in tech. Yeah. Totally. Once again, everything is planned in my life. So I did that, and then I did an MBA. And I worked for a year after my MBA. And these tech guys kept telling me that I wouldn't understand it because it was too technical. And I was thinking, okay, I have 2 ways to go here. Either I agree with them because I didn't have any tech background, or I could do something about it. So I chose the latter. And I went back to university and did another postgrad in computer science, as it was at the time. And then when I landed into Austin, my first job was in the Olive Garden as a waitress, Miss Hospitaliano, just like to put it out there, my pinnacle of my career. And then I got what was called a real job. So I ended up working for the government it was supposed to be a 3-month contract, and it was in their IT department. This is how old I am, in their IT department. And I was supposed to, pardon?
Sending faxes?
Sending faxes, yes, sending faxes. No, it was actually even better than that. I had to train the Austin Police Department and the Sheriff's Department on implementation of the Brady Bill, which was, you know, you could concealed
God.
weapons. Yeah, I know. And I like remember
13 years, and you're telling me things I literally have never known about you.
Apparently, you never asked. So anyway,
is this how you built your relationship with the FBI and extracted me from my home that one time with the FBI?
No, that was a whole other story. But yes, I did extract you with the FBI. So I used to have to go to central booking at 4 a.m. because it was a shift change to do this training with these guys. Now, I'd never seen a gun before. I was completely terrified of guns, all right? Like this was back to the movies and back to Tucson and all that sort of thing, you know, the cowboys, Wild West, all that. So I used to make them put all their guns away. I'm like, what if they go off? Like, you can't just leave them there in the holster. So these guys thought I was some sort of raving lunatic. So anyway, I would have to make them put the guns away, but I trained them on this system. And then because I was working for the government and I was awake and enthusiastic, they thought, well, they'll just let me work on something else. So I ended up getting a full-time job there and worked there for about 4.5 years, always in the...
It's probably because you brought them lots of Olive Garden from all your contacts.
There you go. Yes. So worked for 4.5 years in the IT department on a whole variety of different projects. And it was one of the probably more interesting points in my career because I had no idea what I was doing. Absolutely no idea whatsoever. But somehow it didn't really matter. I was enthusiastic and I was awake and I wanted to learn. And they thought, well, let her off, you know, because no offense to government employees, but at that time in that department, there wasn't many people who were as enthusiastic as me. So with that disclaimer, we just continued to that. So then when we came out to the Bay Area, I was sort of positioned to work in IT. I'd done a lot of system implementations in the government, and I had really good fun doing it. I mean, it was really, really, really good fun. And I did get used to guns eventually, but not fully. Like, it's still weird for me for people to walk around with guns. Yeah. But anyway, but I learned how to drive a Ford F-350. Love that big truck. It was great. So that was my journey.
So far on the resume, I have you know how to pack a teeth chest. You know what a teeth chest is.
I know what a teeth chest is.
Yeah. We have Olive Garden. We have computer science. We have MBA. We have something with European history and law and some whatever.
Yeah. Okay. But that's not my early career. My early career is unrelated. Sorry, let's go back to that. So I started working in a pub when I was 12. And that was the first soiree into business as far as I was concerned. Supply chain. Learned lots about supply chain there. So yeah.
So is that the part of your resume where you just kind of summarize other odds and ends?
Oh no, I'm very proud. Very proud of working in a pub. I could pull a mean pint of Guinness.
Zero doubts. I have zero doubts about that.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Okay. All right. So in all that, it might be a moot point, but did you imagine this would be like when you were young? Like, where did you imagine you would end up? Or you probably didn't.
I didn't, to be honest with you. And I went to I ended up doing the course that I did because, well, for a whole variety of reasons, but nothing really at all to do with European politics and law. It had more to do with the Bob Dylan concert, but that's a whole other topic. But I wanted to sort of get some sort of broad brush education to start, then find my calling in life, you know. So, but then once I graduated and, you know, worked for a very short amount of time in Ireland, before I won the green card, we were looking at going somewhere. It was either going to be South Africa, Australia, or if I won the green card, it was going to be America. So there was no real predefined destiny. It was like just figure out where we're going to go, land there, and then figure out what to do. So again, planning is not quite in my my gene, you know. But is it anything different than I would have expected when I was a kid? I don't know. I mean, it's hard to say because I'm not really sure what I would have expected, you know. And I'm not sure if I had stayed in Ireland, would I be doing something completely different? Probably. I probably would be working in the European Parliament or doing something more sort of related to my degree in that case. But if you're speaking to my mother, she thinks that I'm an Italian translator. So if anybody on this reviewing this is talking to my mother, no. yeah. She thinks I went to college, did Italian, and that was my calling in life. So.
Okay, well, all of you have your directions out there who are listeners. If you ever talk to Suzanne's mom, but all of those experiences, like these stories, to me, just summarized who you are, which is you are more someone who says why not versus why. And that has led you to so many interesting experiences in life, but it's also, you know, really drawn on a lot of resilience, right? Because when you plop yourself somewhere new, whether by yourself or with a husband or family or, you know, whatever, you have to draw on that resilience. And so is that something that you recognize about yourself? Is that something that, you know, you can explain, or is it just inherent?
I think, so definitely there's something there to it, and it's definitely the why not. You give it a go anyway. And if it works, it works. If it doesn't, it doesn't. And I think that's probably explains why I'm not that planful. I'm going to keep going back to that. But if I have my grandmother on my father's side was a big influence in my life, and she led a very interesting life, and she ended up getting caught up in the Civil War in Ireland and was burnt out of her home 3 times in Northern Ireland because there was a little bit of tension at the time between Britain and Ireland, and they were successful Catholics in business and you weren't really allowed to be. So anyway, so she got burnt out 3 times and tried to rebuild 3 times and ended up moving to Dublin. And then subsequently, she lost 3 of her children in quick succession in very tragic circumstances. And she managed to rise above all of that and move forward and give back and be an incredibly successful businesswoman. And she, instead of sort of giving up or crawling back under a rock, which any one of us would have done with any of those circumstances, not to mind all of them together, you know, she was like, nope, here's what we're going to do. We're going to move it forward and continue to pay it forward. And like she funded a lot of other Catholics who were in similar situations in Northern Ireland to come south and start up their businesses. She also ran soup kitchens. She continuously gave back to the community. And just, you know, when you grow up in that type of environment with a strong figure like Granny Rice, it's amazing, like what sort of becomes second nature to you without even realizing it. You know, it's just sort of, it becomes built into your DNA, whether you were born with it or not. I don't know, nature versus nurture, but you know, you sort of, I certainly would have learned from her that you never give up and there's always something out there for you. Just keep at it and just bring people along with you and always give back. And I think that at an early age, learning that and understanding that really helped. So.
Yeah. Okay. Hold that thought because we're going to come back to it.
Okay.
I have more questions about that. But let's maybe transition a little bit to some other topics. You, certainly since I've known you and before that, you've worked for a few companies, tech companies, not Olive Garden companies, tech companies. Although Olive Garden has its own culture, I'm sure, but I wanted to talk a little bit about culture and leadership. So maybe you could just tell us a little bit about the different tech jobs that you've had, and then, you know, what has been the key to adapting to those different cultures?
Yeah. So I'll start by saying I've been incredibly fortunate. I mean, I've had a great journey. I've had great fun along the way, and I really appreciate everything that I have been able to achieve. I was with Cisco for a long time, as you know, and it was probably it was the right time in my career to be at Cisco. I was sort of earlier in career. And with Cisco, you were allowed to move around and do different things. Like there was no restrictions on that. Like the sense was just go off and do something else, try something else and so forth. So I got a really good grounding in a general management type of space. And people allowed me to do things that like they probably shouldn't have because I didn't really know what I was doing, but sort of gave me the leash or whatever to go do it. And that really suited me. And I just sort of assumed that all companies were like that, or that's just, what you did. So I had a soiree out to McAfee for 2 years, which was a story for another day. And it was fine. It was a good experience and I don't regret it, but it was definitely not necessarily part of, it didn't turn out to be what I expected to be. I thought I was going to be working in a small SaaS company. And when I landed, McAfee were acquired by Intel, which was a fabulous company, but large and big, not small in SaaS. So I ended up going back to Cisco for another 2 years, which was great. And then I went to Apple, and I spent 3 years in Apple, and overall a great experience, but very, very different culture. And I think it was the first time in my life that I was like, oh, this is what this sort of intangible culture thing is. And at Apple, the culture is more around, and they teach you this when you get there, category 1, 2, and 3. And category 1 is your subject matter expertise, and you're expected to go very deep on that. Category 2 would be sort of what I call your first cousins, where you need to go and get advice sometimes. And then category 3, you would never talk to these people at all. So in that type of culture, the expectation is that you go very, very deep. And I had people on my team that had been in the same role for 20 years. Which is phenomenal. There's nothing wrong with it, but just very different to what I was used to. So I spent about 3 years there, and then sort of realized that I liked my job, I liked the people that I worked with, but the culture wasn't for me. I was more sort of dynamic and so forth. So I made the choice to leave, which was a tough choice at the time, but left. And then ended up at, well, I took 6 months off, as you know, and renovated the house. I know lots about plastering now, but in the meantime, then went to Facebook, and I had absolutely no idea. Like I never had, back to my planning, I never had Facebook on my horizon or Facebook as a company to go work there or whatever. And I got approached by them, and they very kindly offered me a job. And it's a very different culture again. And I'm very long in the tooth to be realizing what culture was, but it is sort of it's now become a really interesting topic to me because I didn't realize it for so long, because it was just there and it was inherent and it was around me. When you then find different cultures, like you tend to examine them in more detail. So Facebook is very different culture. It's a very young culture, and the average age is 29, I believe, which brings with it a really interesting dynamic, really fun dynamic, So and I would say that the culture is probably more akin to Cisco while I was there than to anywhere else that I worked, but it suits me. And that's sort of where I would come down to, like, you have to find whatever that thing culture is, whatever that sort of intangible thing that you want to grab onto, but you don't know what it is, and it's not, it's hard to grab onto. But it's whatever feels right, maybe, or wherever you feel comfortable in. And when you get to that point, seize it and go for it, and try and figure it out and poke around and think about, okay, what does this look like? What does it feel like? What's good, what's bad, and so forth. But it's something that in chapter 3 of my life, I really want to do some more work on and some more thinking about, and try and sort of think about it through more strategically than maybe I am at the moment, because I think it's something that we underestimate, but yet it's so, if you're not in the right culture and if you're not in the right environment, I don't know that you can be successful, because you're not bringing your best self to work,
Yeah. I give this advice a lot, talking to MBA students. First of all, I say Cisco is not your last job post-MBA. It's your first job post-MBA. And, this is as much about you deciding if Cisco, and, at big companies, there's the concentric circles, right? So the group, the organization, the company. This is much about you deciding if Cisco's for you, as it is about Cisco deciding if you're for us. And I do mean that, and I say, you've got to pay attention to everything that's going on around you, how people interact when they think that nobody's watching, and, kind of the subcontext. It's harder when you haven't had the experiences, and it's harder perhaps when you haven't been in a job or at a company where it is the wrong fit, because it's such a stark realization of how much it matters, right? But I think that it's definitely I don't know, maybe we're both old, so maybe it's just a matter of getting older, where you kind of appreciate more that sort of stuff, right? So speaking of being first, let's talk a little bit about leadership. Whether it's leadership of the neighborhood, leadership at a company, leadership of Girl Scout troop.
All of the above. I got kicked out of Girl Scout troop when I was young. So it was sort of ironic that I
Did
was the
you?
leader. Yeah, I think Girl Scouts of America might come and strip off my Girl Scout leadership credentials from me.
Did it have anything to do with the fact that you worked in a pub when you were 12? Like maybe there's not a badge for that you put on your badge.
There should be. Actually, there should be. We need to work on that. No, it was more. I'm very much. I don't do anything that's not real. Like I can't do fiction. I can't do, like, I've never watched Star Wars. I've never watched Star Trek. I don't like Harry Potter because, it's just not real. So we had to dance around this fire and sing a song, but like there was no fire there. We were in a church hall or something. I'm like, there is no fire there. Like, why would we dance around a fire when it's not there? Anyway, it was suggested that, maybe it wasn't the place for me. So that was the end of that. But we're talking about leadership, not about failed Girl Scout attempts.
There's always a first time.
There's always a first time. Yes. Yeah. So, it's funny. I'm working with a group called Girls Leadership Academy Meetup, GLAM, which I'm excited to work with. And they're 8 to 12-year-olds who have their own startups. So if you want to feel inadequate, please join me on that journey with me. But awesome bunch of kids. And they do an awful lot with kids and mentoring. And my own daughter is one of the mentors of it and so forth. But I had to do a speech or talk with them 2 years ago now on leadership. And I'm thinking, like, what the hell am I going to say? Like, they're 8 to 12-year-olds, So I thought back to when I was 8 to 12, and I remember this distinctly. To the day I'll die, I remember I was in, Miss Cremens was the name of the school. And we had to do a concert. And we were going to sing Rhinestone Cowboy. That was my party piece at the time. And so we had to.
Okay, well, when the pandemic's over,
yes, yeah.
We're having to
break into it right now.
Put in a request.
Exactly. So I had to. They were deciding who was going to introduce this song, and I remember I was standing. There was windows behind me. We're standing in a row. There's 4 or 5 of us, and each one of us was to step forward and say, "And now we're going to perform Rhinestone Cowboy." And they got to me and they're like, "We're going to skip across her. She's too quiet." You can imagine I was actually quiet at one point in my life. And I thought, screw this. I stepped forward and I was like, "And now?" And I remember like stepping forward thinking I'm going to get expelled and projecting my voice to the back of the room and thought, screw you that you think I'm too quiet and you're not going to give me a chance, So I told the 8 to 12-year-olds this story in Silicon Valley. You can imagine they're like, "Who is this crazy lady?" And the other thing that I noticed, I had sort of observed the speaker beforehand and watched the kids and so forth. And although they're incredibly smart and incredibly technical and really, really bright kids, they didn't necessarily have a sense of having confidence in themselves. So one of the things that I had them do was stand up and walk around with a book on their head. So they had to like walk very tall in order to keep this book straight. And if they dropped the book, they had to go back to their chair and start again. So we did that 3 times around each one of their tables. And another one was I went and had them introduce themselves to each other, and they'd shake hands and look themselves in the eye. Now this is, pre-COVID where we could actually touch each other. And then I went on to talk about leadership, and it was like, okay, when I was your age, here was my experience. Leadership is having that confidence within yourself, but it doesn't come naturally. Like, you have to think about, how am I being perceived? How am I walking? Am I looking people in the eye? Am I shaking people's hands? Do I, in that first 10 seconds, do I instill like, oh, this person knows what they're talking about? And I think it was an interesting experience for all of those kids. And they're really cute when they write write-ups afterwards about what they learned. Like, it's very, very sweet to see them and see them year over year. But I think that it's that, sort of ability to just feel like you belong and feel like you can take command of a situation that is so critically important. And I think a lot of girls in particular miss out on that because they don't like have the balls or whatever to step forward and say, "No, hang on, I can do this," or if they are given that situation, like they're sort of at the wrong age and there's boys involved and all of that type of dynamic, that like, I don't think that we do enough for the girls at that point to really instill whatever that sort of confidence or leadership gene is, or whatever that it factor is that then goes on later in life where they're they seem like, oh, actually they should be listened to, or they do actually know what they're talking about, so it's an odd one, and I don't know whether I will come back to, I was incredibly quiet and incredibly shy when I was younger, and I think that them trying to step over me for the introduction was certainly a pivotal moment. I also think working in the pub, I mean, if you're standing behind the bar of a pub and you have them all shouting at you for a drink at one time, you learn quickly to figure it all out, so
yeah.
But I think that's part of it as well, just unusual experiences.
I remember very distinctly being a young girl, and my dad, who was, in business, he teaching me how to shake hands.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And shake hands in the right way, meaning confidently, with a secure grip, with the look in the eye, what it meant to have a long handshake versus a short handshake, and, kind of how to navigate, like if somebody, shakes your hand and puts their other hand on your shoulder, or like different things that people do when they shake hands, and how, not only to decide for yourself what's comfortable, but how to navigate other responses. And that then elevated into, the double kiss on the cheek, and different, different ways that people greet each other globally. But to your point, like to this day, like I find myself talking to my kids about here's how you shake hands, right? And I do think that is, one of the, obviously one of the first impressions that, people have. And I think that that's great that, you're not letting them rest on their smarts. It's like the whole package, right? It has to be the whole package.
Also, it especially, and I think it's particular in Silicon Valley, it's not necessarily taught. Like this is not part of the curriculum, Now, I think that there are some of the single-sex schools around the place that tend to spend more time on this and try to instill more confidence, but it's not part of the normal curriculum. And I think that kids, they'll do fine. They're smart. They'll be fine. But there still is always a human factor there. So how do we encourage that human factor, and how do we build upon that? Is what I think is critically important.
Yeah. Great story. Okay, so our last topic for today is about being a working mom. Although I say working moms, when I was thinking last night about the topics with you, I sort of felt the need to caveat, because the neighborhood where we met, there's a lot of gay men, and so it reminded me that the concept of working mom is very fluid these days, and that I don't want to offend anybody who, doesn't identify as a mom, but identifies with the role and the, perceptions or constraints, societal constraints around that, that moniker of working mom. So I felt it was really important to caveat that you don't have to identify as a woman, be a woman physically, or, be necessarily a mom. To feel like you fall into the category of a working mom. But I mean, it's definitely something that I watched your kids are older than mine. And, I watched you navigate that through many different, both of us, many different, sitters or nannies or, helping each other, you helping me more than me helping you. But so the story goes.
We all survived.
And, but also for me, watching you, it's not just about working and then, all the work that goes into, a family and raising kids and all that, but you're like very heavily involved. I mean, you're, and this goes back to your, grandmother, is that you do the Girl Scout troop, and but you always have time for the neighbor who needs blah blah blah, or needs this help or that help, or you're part of like 1,000 groups, and so how do you? Is that just something that comes naturally to you? How do you, or is that what fulfillment means to you?
Yeah, it's interesting because I don't know is the very short answer to it. Like, I just don't know. It's something that I do, but I know a couple of things. I get a lot of energy from being around people. So I think that drives a lot of it. I get a lot of energy from giving back to the community. Like, I always feel like, I was incredibly lucky winning my green card. Like, it was really a fortunate day in my life. I came to America with $500, and I've done okay for myself. So, like, if I leave with 500, I'm happy. So it's like, what can I do to improve society and improve the lives of people around me? In the meantime, I think that's probably an element of it as well. In terms of the sort of working parent, or that element of it, lots of caveats in there, so I won't try and cover them all. But yes, to me, it comes down to core versus context. And the example that I always use is, as you know, my kids are somewhat athletic, would have done a ton of sports. So they still do. I'm talking like it's in the past.
Being athletic and doing a lot of sports.
Yeah, yes, I know. Yes, yeah. No, they fortunately they are very athletic and they do a lot of sports.
Yes, they are.
And one of them is still living at home with me in case somebody thinks that I've buried my children somewhere. So yeah, she's in the next room. But I sort of decided at an early age, there was swimming at an early age. And as you know, swimming just takes up an inordinate amount of time. If anybody says their kids are getting into swimming, not a great idea. A good idea from a physical perspective, and they can help themselves to not drown and help others to not drown and so forth. But it takes a lot of time. So I sort of, in the beginning, they would have practice up to 4 times a week, 2 hours each practice. And I was thinking, okay, I guess I bring them to practice and I don't know, like you watch them practice. And it probably dawned on me, I think in practice number 1, I say like I went to a lot of them. I think practice number 1, it dawned on me like they don't care whether I'm on the side of the pool or not. So, however, when we came to swim meets, where they had to be in the pool at a particular time and, swim a particular length and be fed and, all of that sort of thing, that was actually the really important point. So, from a core versus context perspective, the being in the pool for that swim meet, for that particular 30 seconds of, 50-meter breaststroke, that was the core. That was what was important. The swimming 4 times a week, 2 hours each time, not that it wasn't important, but it wasn't important for me to be there. So I sort of made the distinction between the two, The same with Elise plays field hockey, as you know, and has gone to Ireland to play field hockey to college. But anyway, it's a whole other sad moment. But, so did I need to be at all the field hockey practices? No. Did I need to be at the games? Absolutely. So just trying to decide for yourself, like, what's important for you to be there, what's additive for you to be there, and then what can you not quite outsource, but as you know, we had very good au pairs all throughout the years. Well, mostly very good. But a few, one or two that you remember. But so we were fortunate that we had somebody to help us and to be able to bring the kids to practices and so forth. But I would still say that today, like, it's just what's core versus what's context, what's really important versus what is not, not going to have an adverse impact, or it's not going to matter whether you were there or not. And I think that's the balance. And the within that, then maintaining your own sanity. And the kids are incredibly important. They are. But you also have to maintain your own sanity. You have to do something for yourself. So what is it like that's refueling you and refueling your energy? What is that thing? And are you giving enough time to that as well? Because if you're not doing that, then you're probably not doing your best work for your children, or your best work at work and so forth. So it's always for me especially, it's an interesting balance to have, because I have to sort of be having fun in what I'm doing and enjoying what I'm doing and doing some of the creative stuff that I do with jewelry and so forth. That's like, that's what gives back to me, or refuels me, which then allows me to be probably a better person overall, And if I find that I'm not doing that, like at the moment in this pandemic, I'm not doing a lot of creative stuff, and I really need to just get the finger out and do it, but I tend to do it in groups, and the group can't meet, and we're in this sort of like just silly situation that I need to get over myself and get more of it done, but it will blame the pandemic.
Yeah. And when all else fails, we'll just blame the pandemic.
Yes.
I mean, I think that the other thing is that, you're very good about harnessing the community around you, whether that's literally your neighborhood or people at work, like you're just really good at, you know, introducing people, or, you know, teaching your kids that they can rely on a lot of other people instead of just you or Neil, your husband. And I think that that's something that's really admirable, where, you know, you can say, run across the street and get, you know, blah, blah, blah from Karen, you know, or, you know, go on and do blah, 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 you know, down the street for so-and-so, you know, it really teaches them, you know, well, first of all, I learn a lot from that, because it's quicker just to do it myself person, which is a horrible, you know, that can really bog you down. Talk about core versus context. You're spending all of your time on context because it's just quicker to do it yourself. But I think it also just teaches your kids, you know, how to become reliant on the folks that are around them, and also then, you know, give back to them as well. So it makes them more independent.
Honestly, like, and you know, we were very fortunate in the block that we were in, that there, you know, you could go up or down the block, and you knew that if they knocked on somebody's door, that they'd answer the door and bring them in or do whatever needed to be done, you know. So I think it's not typical of all neighborhoods or all societies. So there was definitely an element of that, and that's the reason that I've never moved out of the neighborhood. Moved 3 times, but never out of it, because there's definitely that sense of community, you know. But it is it's super important. Because yes, it, you know, allows them to go off and get help elsewhere, but it also teaches them to go and figure out how to ask for help elsewhere, and how to approach people, and, you know, to remember what they were going for.
It's okay.
And it's okay.
It's okay to ask for help. And I think that that's what, you know, like there's just a lot of lessons in there for sure. Have you ever felt, you know, just in particularly torn between work and home, you know, like where there's that thing that's going on at home and you're not quite sure if you should leave work or not? Somebody's telling you it's not that important, but then you've kind of regretted whatever decision you made, either going home because it wasn't that big of a deal, or staying at work and it turned out to be a bigger deal. Maybe you could've gone home.
I honestly can't remember anything specific, but what I would say is that I've always strived for work-life integration, and I've always been very lucky to work in companies that allow that. So if I needed to get up and go at 3:00 on a Friday, because that's when the Girl Scout meeting was, I would get up and go, and that was it. I volunteered in the kids' schools on Mondays and Wednesdays in the mornings, and I just didn't get to work until 10, and it was okay. It's okay. Now, I mean, I might have worked later in the evening, but, you know, but you sort of have to make that decision for yourself. You can't ask for permission. The minute you ask for permission, there'll be 10 reasons why you can't do it. So sort of giving yourself the leeway to go and do that, and know that you still need to go and do your job and so forth, which is critically important, because at the end of the day, somebody is paying you to do it. But it's okay to balance it in. It was very tough when Ethan was younger, and he had a lot of breathing problems. And I was saying to him the other evening, like, I remember those evenings where Neil traveled a lot of the time to Asia, and the daycare would call me and say, okay, you need an aftercare appointment. And I would have to try and get him and get a lease, and, you know, get him up to Mountain View, to El Camino for a breathing treatment. And, you know, like, and that was, I was just saying to him, like, if we're just looking back on it, that was really, really tough. At the time, you just did what you did. Like, you had to do it, you know, you just keep going forward. But again, it was like, there was never a time where I was like, oh, I have to, you know, I'm going to prioritize, or I even felt that I had to prioritize work. I had the option to not do that if I didn't want to, you know. So I guess I was just lucky. So
it is a whole different level when travel is involved, and you literally can't. You're like, I'm, you know, I don't know, I'm 1,000, 2,000, 3,000 miles away here, you know, on the East Coast. And so that's when, you know, having that broader community of people, like Karen can take Ethan. Well, I'm a bad example because I probably had 19,000 babies at the time, but somebody who is more responsible and available, could you drive Ethan up to the, you know, blah, 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 blah. And and you trusted them that they were going to, you know, consult with you as needed, or, you know, communicate with you as needed. Right. And I think that's the other part of, there are quite a few, you know, moms here, parents here whose families don't live here.
Yep.
Right? Like
Yep.
you're an example.
Yep.
It's increasingly an example because people transplant so many places into the Bay
Yep.
Area. Someone born and raised in California like myself, or in the Bay Area like myself, is like a, like I'm, in the minority now.
Yeah.
But I think, building that group of people that you can rely on, whether it's other moms or neighbors or whomever it is a real key to, being successful in that balance or in that integration. And I'm so glad to hear you say that, because about the integration piece and the not asking for permission. I think one of the things that we can do for, for moms, again, however you define that, working parents in general, is to give them the leeway to manage a 24/7 schedule.
Yeah.
If that means you're working for 4 hours on a Saturday morning, like, who cares?
So be it. Doesn't matter.
And if that means you want to do Mondays and Wednesdays at the school for, whatever it is, who cares?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Like, life will go on. If you miss an important meeting, again, whoever it is in your community at work will take care of it. Somebody there will take notes for you or record the meeting or something, right?
Yeah.
And if it's that important, then, you make that decision. And I do think that leaving individuals to their own decisions about how they spend their time, again, with the caveat that, yes, you're being paid to perform a job and you have to do that and you have to do that well.
Yeah.
But I think it's when it's like, wow, this is really a 9-to-5 job. Oh my God. You're automatically ruling out so many parents.
Yeah.
So,
the other thing that I would say is when the kids were younger, I was very strict between 6 p.m. and 9 p.m. that I didn't take calls and I didn't get involved with work, because that was, getting home from daycare or school, getting dinner, doing whatever we were doing, getting them to bed.
Yeah.
Like, it was just, I don't need, like, nobody's going to shut down because I'm not working between that time. But it was just a known thing about me. Like, that's just what I didn't do. If you wanted to talk to me after 9, that was fine, but not between 6 and 9. And just not necessarily looking for permission to do that, but just knowing that that's what you need to do. And if it works for them, great. If it doesn't, well, maybe you're not in the right group or the right job or whatever that is,
Yeah, I recently had a boss and he's like, I don't work between 12 and 1. And that time was constantly encroached on. I mean, this goes back years, right?
Yeah.
But he finally set that boundary because he needed that time in the day to, like, reset.
Yeah.
And, he's somebody who has a stay-at-home wife, work-from-home wife, I should say. And so, there was really no reason other than for himself. But then he realized, like, the value of protecting that time and how hard it was, like, the encroachment on it, was really hard for him. Even at that level, being a man, protecting that 12 to 1 hour every day meant that he was rejecting meetings from his boss or delegating other things or whatever. But that he had this aha moment of how important it was to be able to set that time frame, whether it's 6 to 9 because you're doing dinner and baths and reading and homework and blah, blah, blah. Or whether it's 12 to 1 so that you can sustain, 10 hours of meetings in his case, which could be up to 20 meetings a day. Otherwise, you just can't, like, your brain starts to, go sideways. And so there are benefits beyond that of, working parents, I guess.
Yeah, and it's totally agree. And I think sometimes with everything else going on, back to, like, the me time, like what gives you energy? If for him it's that 12 to 1 recharge time, for me it's something different. But remember to do that, because if we don't schedule that in, then we forget, and we schedule everything else in. So might as well schedule that in as well.
It's true. It's true for sure. So any other, salacious stories you want to tell us? Being 12, working at a bar. What's your favorite item on the Olive Garden menu?
Haven't been to the Olive Garden since, so let me just put that out there.
I mean, I will say it is true that you did bring the FBI to rescue me.
I did bring the FBI to rescue you. Yes,
locking myself in a bedroom. Yes, a 1940s Craftsman lock.
Yeah. And I just happened to have an FBI agent with me at the time, so it seemed appropriate to bring him along. Like, is that or a locksmith? I didn't have a locksmith, so We figured that out.
We only had the FBI.
We only had the FBI.
Great. Yeah, it was just great tax dollars at work. I really do appreciate it. It's it was a little bring you sand to the beach, or what is that saying? Like when you know, like you it's something bigger than the actual thing you need to perform the task. But
did we get you out of the room? Yes, we did.
Yes, you did. And with my newborn child, because apparently I left my brain in the delivery room as well.
No, it was the child outside, I think, that we were more worried about, not the child that was with you.
Right. Oh, my God,
you and the child were fine.
Oh, that's right. I was by myself in the room, which in hindsight, I should just
you had locked somebody out.
I did have a small child. They had two small children. They were both very upset. They slid the iPad under the door and allowed me to text you from the iPad.
Yeah, well, you know, that was ingenious.
You figured it out. See?
You figured it out.
It takes a village.
It takes a village.
It takes the FBI.
Like whatever it takes.
You're
there and ready.
I love it. All right. Well, thanks for the casual conversation.
Thank you very much for the invite.
Yes, I'm honored to have you.
You need more girls. Have I mentioned that? More girls in your casual conversations?
Yes, I've been scolded, but you're the first.
Awesome.
So all else will.
I'm sure there'll be many more. Yeah.
All right. Thank you.
All right. Thanks so much, Karen. Take care.